Repositioning cruises are some of my absolute favorites. But here's what the cruise lines don't tell you. These cruises are not for everyone. And if you're the wrong person, that $35 a night deal can end up costing you more than you ever expected. Today I'm going to protect you from making that mistake. I'm Gary with Optimal Cruising, bringing you the cruise insider information you need to avoid mistakes, save money, and protect yourself so that you can have your best cruise ever. A while back, my parents took a repositioning cruise from Port Canaveral, Florida to Barcelona, Spain. The total cost of the cruise for the two of them was $1,600. But after they got back, my dad added up the entire cost of that whole trip, and he said it was well over $6,000. Now that doesn't mean you can't do a repositioning cruise on a budget. You can, but there are some important things to look out for that cause people on these cruises to spend a lot more than they initially thought. You always have to consider the airfare. If you are traveling to Europe or Asia on a repositioning cruise or the other direction, you're going to have to buy a one-way international flight. And they're not always that cheap. It depends on the time of year and how far in advance you plan and book that flight. Some parts of the year you can get a one-way flight from the US to Europe for about $300. Other times, it could be closer to $800 or $1,000. It's important to consider that because that could really blow your budget if you're trying to do a repositioning cruise without spending a ton of money. And then a lot of these repositioning cruises will involve extra hotel stays, and that's an added expense. And the third thing that surprises a lot of cruisers on these repositioning cruises is a little phenomenon called boredom spending. What happens when you have a cruise with a week of sea days in a row? People sometimes get bored and end up spending more money on things to entertain themselves, buying more drinks, playing more in the casino, getting more onboard services like spa treatments and things. These add up fast, especially on a cruise ship. And if you're just on a typical one-week cruise, say in the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, where you're getting off the ship almost every day, you're not spending as much on that cruise ship. But when you're stuck on that ship for a week with no port days, you might be spending a lot more than you planned. Now, if you like to just get away from everything, sit and read, watch videos, listen to podcasts, and relax, this might be a great cruise for you, and you don't need to really spend a whole lot of extra money if you plan properly. That being said, this next type of cruiser really should avoid a repositioning cruise at all costs. I remember the very first cruise I took decades ago was out of New Orleans down to the Caribbean and a couple ports in Mexico. And I wasn't sure back then that I really liked sea days that much. It might have been the older ships without all the bells and whistles that they have today, but it took me a while to get used to the rhythm of a sea day. And that's why I don't recommend anybody who's taking their very first cruise to do it on a repositioning cruise if that repositioning cruise involves many sea days. Now, some don't. There are some shorter repositioning cruises that just go up and down the coast or that go through the Panama Canal that don't have as many sea days. But most repositioning cruises have a week or more of sea days. And that's not really the way to test out your sea legs, especially if you're crossing a major ocean like the Atlantic or Pacific where you can have rough waters. It's better for a first-time cruiser to pick a cruise that is shorter with a lot of port days. A week is a perfect amount of time because if you have a lot of port stops, you're getting on and off, it's a distraction from the ship. And if you don't really enjoy cruising, you'll still have a good vacation. And if you're looking to find a great deal on that first cruise or 100th cruise, we maintain a list of the best cruise deals you can book right now. If you'd like a copy, just comment deals or click on the deals link in our description. One thing I really love about Caribbean cruises is the general Vegas-style entertainment you find on board. Now, they're not bringing headliners on most of these ships, but you're going to get a good comedian, maybe a magician, maybe a ventriloquist, maybe some kind of juggling acts and things, and it's kind of entertainment you don't see every day, and it's enjoyable. And if that's what you're seeking on your cruise, you're not going to find it generally on a repositioning cruise, because most of these repositioning cruises are having lengthy sea days, they're long cruises, and it's expensive for the cruise line to bring these entertainers on for an extended period of time. Most of these entertainers who are operating, for example, in the Caribbean, they get on for a couple ports, they get off, they get on another ship, ride that ship for a couple ports, get off, go on another ship, and they have a routine and a contract to follow. In the case of repositioning cruises, that entertainment's going to be toned down a lot. You're mostly going to have in-house musical type productions, and while they might bring on one or two people to entertain you, it's not going to be of the same caliber or quality that you find on a typical circular Caribbean cruise. How important is that entertainment on a cruise for you? Let me know in the comments below. I always thought Caribbean cruises were pretty port intensive, but that was before I ever tried a Mediterranean cruise or a Greek Isles cruise. These cruises are so port intensive, you might have a week cruise with no sea days. In the Caribbean, a typical 7-night cruise will give you about 2 sea days. In the Mediterranean, it'll give you about 1. And you can do Greek Isles cruises that also stop in some other countries like Turkey that'll have absolutely no sea days because those stops are all close enough together and it's easy for the ship to get from one to the next overnight. If you need those constant port days to really feel like you're on vacation and seeing something new every day or every other day, then a repositioning cruise isn't always going to be the best for you. In fact, I have a good friend who recently did a Greek Isles cruise, and I suggested that he take a cruise from Florida over to Italy in order to start that Greek Isles cruise, but he absolutely refused. He said, no, I'm just going to fly there because I need port days. He likes to get off the ship and see everything going on and find a new place and have new discoveries every day. If that's you, then you want to stick to those types of cruises. Repositioning cruises are great if you want to get away from it all, if you want a week of total relaxation and withdrawal from the activities of daily life. You can really do that and get some peace and calm on a repositioning cruise. But if you're a very active person that always is get up and go, it may bother you a little bit that you have all this continuous downtime. But there's another thing that somewhat bothers me about repositioning cruises. Before my first ever repositioning cruise, I always associated cruising with the Caribbean. Always sunny, warm weather, wearing your swimsuit out on the pool deck, jumping in the pool, no problems. But on repositioning cruises, it's different. The weather changes, and it can change drastically. You can start out a cruise in Miami, for example, where it's 85, 90 degrees, and by day 2, it's barely 60 degrees in the middle of the Atlantic. For me, that took quite a bit to get used to because I thought I'm going to have this whole cruise laying by the pool. But by day 2 or 3, most people are staying indoors because it gets quite chilly. Now, the sun is still nice, and sometimes I would still go out there. But it's important to understand the fluctuations in weather on these types of cruises. They're not all like this, but the transatlantic ones typically are. The weather is inconsistent. Sometimes you can do a Trans-Pacific cruise at certain times of the year where the weather will be warm most of the way. On the other hand, if you're doing a repositioning cruise that hugs the continent, like one that goes through the Panama Canal, you could have warm weather for most of those days. But it's important to understand these types of changes. It's not a typical sun-seeking cruise, and if you're looking for that, you have to be very careful on how you book it. And then what about those people who love cruising because of the all-inclusive packages? I know a lot of cruisers who won't cruise without the drink package, and I get it. I've had it myself. It's nice sometimes to just get on a cruise and not worry about what you're ordering. Have a good time. Sit down by the pool, go and get whatever drinks you want. You don't like something, throw it out and go get another one. It's nice to have in some cases, but on repositioning cruises, the costs are exorbitant. And for some people, it's difficult to justify the expense of a drink package on a 14-night repositioning cruise because you might pay $600, $700 per person for that cruise, which is an incredible deal. But the drink package will cost you easily $1,100 or $1,200. That's almost double the price of the cruise itself. And that goes the same, although to a smaller degree, for the Wi-Fi package or any other specialty dining packages that you might purchase. One of the ways I work around this personally is I always go a la carte when it comes to things like the drink package when I'm on a repositioning cruise. And there are some reasons why that makes sense, because if you think about it, on these long cruises, there are much less people buying these drink packages, and so sales are down for that cruise ship. And what they tend to do on these longer cruises is offer more specials on board, which means you'll find more happy hour selections, more 2-for-1 specials. Some cruise lines like Royal Caribbean will hand out these punch cards for 10 drinks. And it might cost you $50, which is a great deal for 10 drinks on board. And there are other things that they'll do to try to promote their bar service so that they make a little more money that they're losing because not so many people are buying that drink package. But there is one type of cruiser that usually avoids repositioning cruises that has a silver lining to it. I'm going to get to that next, but first, if you would take a minute and subscribe to our channel, hit that like button. It helps us grow, and you won't miss our next video. I've been on a lot of repositioning cruises, and there are always some kids on board, but not as many. Repositioning cruises are more difficult for families with children because they're longer cruises and they tend to operate during periods when schools are in session. So it's hard to pull a kid out of school for that length of time. And not only that, if you are traveling with kids, it's hard to keep them on a boat for a week straight when most of these ships aren't those mega ships with all the extra activities. So there isn't as much to do for kids generally. And because there are far fewer kids on these types of cruises, the ones who do go have a harder time finding somebody their age to connect with for the cruise. And a lot of cruisers tell me that they like these repositioning cruises because there aren't as many kids running around. If you do a repositioning cruise on any cruise line, you'll find it more kind of like a celebrity environment where there are going to be some kids, but they're not taking over the ship. Not all repositioning cruises are created equal. Some more exotic cruises go to and from Europe from, say, South America, or more obscure islands in the Caribbean. And it might seem like a great cruise to start off in another country like that, go overseas, end up in Europe, see a little bit of Europe before flying home. But you have to realize that those repositioning cruises will have a very different vibe than one coming to or from a U.S. port. If you're used to cruises to the Caribbean, the Bahamas, Bermuda, or really anywhere out of a U.S. city or a Canadian city, it has a certain feel, a certain American feel, you might say. But cruise ships going to and from foreign countries like those in South America or in the Caribbean islands, where that's the actual endpoint or start point of the cruise, will have a very foreign feel, a much more European or Brazilian feel to it. And that might be great if you like to immerse yourself in other cultures. If you don't want to be immersed in a different culture where most of the people are speaking a different language, where the entertainment is geared towards another culture, then make sure the repositioning cruise you book either starts or ends in a US city. That will ensure that that cruising experience is a lot more like what you're used to on a typical Caribbean or Bahamas cruise. So now that you know what type of person is best suited for a repositioning cruise, there are some major differences between these cruises and typical circular cruises that catch a lot of passengers off guard. I'll tell you all about those right here.